Welcome back. Well, as Egypt's military turns its guns on its own civilians, Israel is watching on. The two countries have a long-standing peace treaty, and a stable Egypt is essential to secure the border. Now, all of this is playing out while the United States tries to inch Israelis and Palestinians toward a peace deal. Joining me now is Or Avi-Guy, a PhD candidate from Melbourne University and a policy analyst with the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council. Nice to have you on the program, Or. We'll look at the implications of Egypt in just a moment, but looking at the resumption of these peace talks, we have rocket attacks from Gaza, a strike from Israel against Palestinian targets leading up to these talks. It's hardly a good beginning, is it?
Well, we also had a prisoner release today, and I think that unfortunately it's never a good beginning. Things are always going on, and unfortunately the situation in Egypt is not helping with terror groups like the Islamist Jihad in Sinai and in Gaza. But I think that the attack from Gaza and from Sinai has more to do with political rivalries within the Palestinian different factions between Hamas and even more extremist Islamist terror organizations, and less to do with specifically the peace talks.
Now, you're right to mention the Palestinian prisoner release, which was seen as one of the conditions of being able to move these talks forward and a show of goodwill. At the same time, though, Israel's announcing increasing the size of its settlements, the very thing that many Palestinians say impedes a resolution. How does that help?
Well, settlements is definitely an issue within the general peace talks and the framework, but I think that one of the main problems and one of the main counterproductive discussions around peace talks is to just point at one specific issue and make that an excuse to say, oh, peace talks are not going to work, or as long as they're construction, as long as settlements are not being evacuated, and all of that talk, making settlements a main feature as if it's not just one of many complicated issues. It puts a lot of pressure on Israel, and it's very counterproductive when you want to move forward from a zero-sum game to a win-win situation, to negotiations in good faith. And it's very hard to do when people are playing the blame game. It is obvious to most Israelis, and most of them support the two-state solution, that some territorial compromise will have to take place as part of an implementation of any peace deal. But at the same time, it needs to be a peace deal that secures and reassures Israel that some of its main interests are still being kept. Now, we've seen unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. It didn't work well for Israel security-wise, nor did it advance peace. We saw a construction of in the settlement. We saw a freeze in the first term of President Obama. He really pushed forward to have that because he thought that that will help the peace process, and he didn't at that time. And there was a de facto freeze in construction in settlements leading up to negotiations. But settlements are a part of a conclusive deal, or as part of negotiations. It's not, it cannot be a precondition, and it cannot be held against Israel in the meanwhile, because it wasn't productive before. It's counterproductive now.
Or let's turn now to the Egyptian situation. Very simply, can you have a functioning peace between Israelis and Palestinians without a stable Egypt?
That is a very good question, but I think that the situation between Israel and the Palestinians, the framework is something, and then the peace process, the negotiations, is something that both sides have control on. Unfortunately, Egypt, I'm afraid that even Egyptians don't really have control over what's going on there. So we can only do what we can do, and the Palestinians can only do what they can do. And
but you need Egypt to secure the border, particularly along Gaza. We know there's been a problem there with people moving through the tunnels and bringing weapons through the tunnels. Without Egypt being secure, how can you possibly control that?
That is definitely a major security threat to Israel now, and it's getting worse and worse. It has been a concern since the beginning of the unrest in Egypt, and it's been affected by the upheavals. We saw just this week a rocket launch towards Eilat in Israel from the Sinai. We saw another one today towards Sderot in Israel South, and definitely that's a major security concern. But the influence that it has over Hamas, and while it's a security concern for the peace process itself, since Hamas are not a part of the negotiation anyway, the control over Gaza is a separate issue to negotiation themselves. I agree that it completely complicates the picture, as the turmoil in the Middle East consists like a lot of challenges for Israel and the peace talks.
Let me just ask you, or if you look at the situation in Egypt, what is more in Israel's interest, to have the military in control, as violent as we've seen it, or to have an Islamist party like the Muslim Brotherhood running Egypt?
What is best for Israel, and I think that most Israeli security analysts would agree, is to have a stable Egypt with security cooperation regarding Sinai and regarding the Gaza Strip. This is what's best for Israel. The question how that can be achieved, well, Israel has good relationship with, good cooperation with the Egyptian military that has been going on for a few decades now. But even when the Muslim Brotherhood were in charge, still things were relatively quiet, because it was the interest of the Muslim Brotherhood to keep things quiet in that region. I don't think that as long as there is stability and as long as there is peace and quiet, I think that Israel, like it does in Syria, like it does everywhere else, is just wants to stay out of the business and just have secure borders. As long as that is being held, as long as Hamas and the other terror organizations in Gaza are being kept calm and quiet, I think that the rest of it is more of an internal Egyptian issue than Israel's concern.
Or Avi-Guy, thank you very much for joining us here on Newsnight.